So against the Indianapolis Colts, the Las Vegas Raiders had made a small switch among their rookie wide receivers. And against the Tennessee Titans, they took that to the next level where Jack Bech is now the wide receiver 3 for the Las Vegas Raiders. And I want to talk about this. I want to talk about how this is going to impact the Raiders and why I think the Raiders had more success on the offensive side with Jack Bech out there, and why I think what we saw against the Tennessee Titans, I think we're going to see more of that as we kind of go forward. And we're going to talk about it, man. I'm actually really excited that the Raiders have made this switch over to Jack Bech. For about 3 weeks now, I've been essentially complaining about it, that the Raiders need to move off of Dont'e Thornton. He's just not ready. And not move off, that's not the right term, but for a couple of weeks, I've been saying that Dont'e Thornton's really struggling, and it doesn't make sense to have him out there on the offensive side. And the Raiders agreed with this. And last week, for the first time, although it was a small difference, Jack Bech did play a couple more snaps than Dont'e Thornton. And this week, it's essentially flipped. And we now know that Jack Bech will be the Raiders wide receiver as we kind of go forward, specifically the wide receiver 3 role. And it does change this offense, right? Because Thornton brings that 6'5" frame with the 4.3 40-yard dash. Jack Bech doesn't have that, but Bech does add an element that I think we kind of saw in this game against the Titans. And I know some people are going to disagree with this because I already saw the comments from yesterday's video. You can make the argument the Titans are a horrible team. You can make the argument they're not a good football team. But you can also make the argument the Raiders on the offensive side have struggled. And for the first time, they did something, which was they ran more quick game. They extended drives. They had more plays. They picked up more yards, specifically in the second half. And they had more success than they've had in any other game. In fact, the Raiders did not have a 3-and-out, and every single one of their drives picked up at least 40 yards in the second half, minus the final drive in which they need the football because they had won the game. They picked up at least 40 yards on the 4 drives that they had in the second half. That is something we have not done this season. In fact, pretty much every game the Raiders have struggled. They've had multiple 3-and-outs. The Raiders did not have a 3-and-out against the Titans. And you can make the argument that it's because they're a bad football team or they're not coached well or whatever. But, having a rookie quarterback is different than the defense, right? The defense of the Titans is still pretty good. And the Raiders went with a completely different approach. And I think that mindset that the Raiders had against this team, I think we can continue that mindset and potentially have more success as we go forward. And I think against against Kansas City Chiefs, it's going to be pivotal for the Raiders to continue to run this quick game concept, continue to pick up those 3, 4, 5 yard plays essentially, right? And just continue to run those routes that are going to get our guys opportunities with the football. Trey Tucker had a couple of really nice plays where the passes were like 5-6 yards and he took them for 20 plus yards. Jakobi Meyers, Michael Mayer had some nice catch and run opportunities, and both guys delivered for the Las Vegas Raiders. If the Raiders run quick game and they get their playmakers the ball, we know what guys like Michael Mayer and Trey Tucker and Jakobi Meyers can do. And by adding a guy like Jack Bech as opposed to Dont'e Thornton, it adds another wide receiver that can run underneath routes. It's a guy that can actually separate. And that's not a knock on Thornton, but we know this watching the tape. Dont'e Thornton's not a good route runner. Oftentimes, he's running over routes and he slows down in the middle of his routes. And the quarterback throws it and the cornerback essentially catches up because Thornton, he's just too raw at this point. And we had seen this on tape. I had pointed this out multiple times over the past 2-3 weeks. And even the interception that Geno Smith threw, in which he was kind of baited, right? It was a cover 2 trap that the Colts ran last week. Both Pete Carroll as well as the quarterback, both guys blamed Thornton for that play, said he ran the wrong route. Obviously it was a bad decision regardless of how you look at it, but the fact that both guys are saying he ran the wrong route at 2 separate times, it is what it is, right? Thornton is raw, and I think, he'll be a perfectly fine football player in a year or so. But right now, Jack Bech gives the Raiders the best opportunity. And he is now the wide receiver 3 for the Raiders. And it does change this offense because we don't have a guy that's a 4.3 40-yard guy now. At least we don't have 2 of those guys. We still have Trey Tucker. He's a very, very, very quick wide receiver. He can definitely run down the middle of the field. But now we have, 2 guys like Jakobi Meyers. They're guys that can run those underneath routes. And I think that's the biggest thing that the Raiders have been missing. Going out there with Trey Tucker, and Trey Tucker's not a great wide receiver when it comes to running those underneath concepts, right? Jakobi Meyers can obviously run those underneath routes. Michael Mayer can as well. Trey Tucker's not that type of guy, but having 2 guys, if you have Thornton out there versus just 1 with Trey Tucker, does open up the offense for the Raiders, in my opinion. And I think if the Raiders can continue to, Continue that quick game concept. Continue to pick up those 3, 4, 5 yard chunks at a time. Continue to get into 3rd and 4 situations, 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 1s. The Raiders will have more success as they go forward. But it really starts with the fact that you got to win on 1st and 2nd down. And even more than that, you got to stick with the run game. 32 runs is what the Raiders had against the Tennessee Titans. And the Tennessee Titans are not a terrible defense, right? And I know they're not a good football team, but they're not a terrible defense. I think for the Raiders, being able to have that success that you had against the Titans, if you're able to carry that going forward, we will be able to have success. And I do think being able to put Jack Bech out there, it's going to allow you to open up your offense a little bit in terms of the underneath stuff. Also, just want to throw this out there. Jack Bech is a guy that a lot of people kind of question, right? He's a guy that people are saying, hey, why would you take Jack Bech when there are other guys you could have potentially taken? When the Raiders traded the 38th overall pick, they traded it to the Patriots. The Patriots ended up taking a running back, Trevion Henderson, who's a pretty good running back. When the Raiders skipped out and didn't take the guy with the 30th overall pick, they skipped out on Luther Burden, who's having a lot of success. The last 3 games he's played in, he's averaging like 70 yards per game in the last 3, right? The Raiders skipped out on some other pretty damn good football players as well that were drafted in like the 40s and 50 range. So the Raiders, skipped out on all these other guys for a guy who was not even technically starting or contributing up until now. And I do think that Jack Bech will be able to have success as we go forward. And personally, I'm excited to see Jack Bech, just on a personal level. We need this guy to step up and we need this guy to contribute. Last week, he had, I think, 5 targets, and he made the most of those targets. This week, he didn't get any targets, but there were opportunities that the Raiders could have potentially gotten him the ball. Either the offensive line didn't hold up, or Geno ended up throwing it to maybe a different guy, and then that guy kind of made a play. We will see Jack Bech get more opportunities as we kind of go forward, right? Him and Geno will be able to connect. Remember, Jack Bech missed a lot of time with the Raiders early on in the process, and then from that point, Dante Thornton kind of took the job, and then he's kind of held the job, and Bech never got that work. At least early on, he didn't get the same amount of work that Thornton got with Geno Smith, but I do think the Raiders will be able to have success with Bech as we kind of go forward. I'm excited to see the offense, man. I know it was a bad football team, but I do think the offense looked better. So we'll see what we can do as we kind of go forward. We have a couple more updates that are coming out. The Raiders actually went out there and they signed a guard in McClendon Curtis to the practice squad. And some of you guys know who McClendon Curtis is. Some of you guys probably don't know, but the Raiders brought this guy in 2023 as a UDFA. He came out of Chattanooga. He played next to Cole Strange, who was a first-round pick. If you guys remember, the New England Patriots drafted Cole Strange, and Cole Strange hasn't been able to stay healthy, so I don't even think he's the Patriots at this point. But McClendon Curtis played next to Cole Strange, right? These guys played right next to each other. Both guys were pretty damn good for Chattanooga. And Strange obviously was a first-round pick, while McClendon Curtis ended up being a UDFA. I think he was a UDFA. He may have been like a 7th-round pick. I'm pretty sure he was a UDFA. And, the Raiders obviously brought this guy in, and he looked pretty damn good, and I was pretty sure he was going to make the Las Vegas Raiders roster. I think going into training camp, the Raiders ended up cutting him to bring him back to the practice squad. Or he may have actually made the roster. Don't quote me on this. And maybe it was week 1 where he was brought up to the game. And then, at some point we cut him to get him back on the practice squad. And the Seahawks ended up picking him up. So McClendon Curtis ended up getting picked up by the Seahawks. He stayed with the Seahawks for 2 seasons. The Seahawks ended up cutting him going into this most recent season. Went to the Cardinals. Ended up not making their team either. And he was a free agent. So the Raiders obviously brought him in. Or should I say they brought him back. Either way, I like this pickup. The Raiders do need help at the guard position. Right now, our guards are kind of weak. You got Dylan Parham. You got Alex Kappa. Maybe even Meredith, if you want to consider him a guard, right? He was a guard technically in the past. Those guys are all weak, right? It's kind of the opposite of McClendon Curtis. Curtis is a lot stronger. It's a different type of guard, or it's a different type of body that you're essentially potentially bringing in. Now, obviously, I don't think he's going to start anytime soon, if he ever does even start. He may never play, truth be told, but these are the type of high upside players that I think you want if you're a football team. It never makes sense to me why teams say, hey, let's go get Cody Whitehair or even Alex Kappa to that point. It doesn't make sense why you bring those guys in when there are hundreds of McClendon Curtis type of players, right? These are high upside players, and they don't always work out, but I'd much rather take a young, high upside player than a 7th-year veteran that's going to still get bullied around in his 7th season. Just because he has that veteran experience doesn't always make them good football players. We see this with Cody Whitehair. We've seen it with Alex Kappa, right? We see it with some of these guys that they're just really not that good. So I love the idea of bringing back McClendon Curtis. Let's see what this guy has. We'll see if he can potentially push to start. If a guy goes down, you never know what could end up happening. Maybe in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or a month down the line, right? We'll see what ends up happening. Either way, the Raiders are bringing him back, and we have 2 quick updates I want to get into. Pete Carroll was asked about Brock Bowers, and Pete Carroll, I'm going to just read this for exactly what Ryan McFadden says. He says, when asked about Brock Bowers, Raiders head coach Pete Carroll remains optimistic, but Pete Carroll did mention it might be best for the long haul to keep him out until after the bye week. This is kind of wild to me, right? If you guys really think about this. The Raiders, going into week 2, thought we should keep Brock Bowers, who has a PCL injury. We should keep him active and let this guy play out there. And we're, kind of led to believe that it's really not that bad. He's okay, right? He's just kind of banged up a little bit. And then when we saw him out there, he was like wobbling around. It did not look good. And then we continued to play him for 2 more weeks. And finally, going into, I believe, the Colts game, the Raiders said, hey, Brock Bowers is out. He's not playing. And then coming into this week, Brock Bowers is out. He is not playing, which makes sense, right? I'm not disagreeing with keeping him out, but I just disagreed with the process. Why would the Raiders have played this guy? Man, it just does not make sense to me. On the other side of this, Ricky Pearsall also has a PCL injury. The Niners have not played him and did not play him from the moment he got that PCL injury. And Ricky Pearsall has now missed 2 straight games. We'll see if Ricky Pearsall recovers and is ready to go before Brock Bowers, because both guys have PCL injuries. I know one guy's might be worse than the others. I know it's hard to kind of compare, but I feel like Pete Carroll handled this entire situation incorrectly, but we'll see what kind of happens as we go forward. But we should just expect Brock Bowers not to play for the Raiders at this point. I'm okay, honestly. I prefer he doesn't play against the Chiefs. Even if we lose against the Chiefs, it is what it is. I would much rather have Brock Bowers healthy after the bye week. Now, I don't know if he needs like 2 whole months without contact to be fully healthy. I don't know how a PCL injury works at that point. Maybe if even in 3 weeks from now, if he is fully healthy and he takes a hit, the injury could potentially come right back. I don't know, right? So I think the best thing the Raiders can do is just let Brock Bowers recover. Also, Michael Mayer had himself a pretty damn good game. I don't know what the hell clicked with Michael Mayer, but the guy was breaking tackles. He was making people miss. He did have a drop on a 2nd and 4 play, which set up a 3rd and 4, which we ended up punting afterwards because Stone Forsythe got his ass kicked. But I look at how we've handled Brock Bowers, and it almost makes sense just to keep him out as long as possible. Let's just go forward with Michael Mayer. Let the guy show what he kind of can do. Mayer, I think he's in year 3 at this point, so this is a big year for him, right? He 34th overall pick. Maybe Michael Mayer ends up having a 1,000-yard season, right, from this point forward. I think for the Raiders, the best thing you can do is just let Brock Bowers get fully healthy. There's no point of having him out there at 80%. It just does not make sense. He's not the same player, and he's only 23 years old, so he has like 10-plus years left in his NFL career. Best thing the Raiders can do is just keep Brock Bowers out until he's fully healthy. But do expect him to not play until after the bye at the very minimum. So if you're in a fantasy football, man, there's your guys' warning right there. He's probably not going to play. And then finally, we are playing the Kansas City Chiefs, and wide receiver Rashee Rice, who is, believe it or not, the number 1 wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. His 6-game suspension is over, and he is eligible to play against the Las Vegas Raiders. So he will play, right? I don't know. I don't think he was around the team during his suspension, so he's probably had like 6 weeks of no activity, no football, which, so maybe the Chiefs don't play him or he's on a limited pitch count or whatever. But Rashee Rice is coming back. So, I do think the Chiefs are a better football team than the record indicates. So I think they're like 3-3. They've had some close games against some tough opponents. But Rashee Rice coming back does add another element. Xavier Worthy's a first-round pick. He's pretty damn good as well. Rashee Rice, pretty damn good as well. They picked up Tyquan Thornton, who I don't even know if he's their 3rd wide receiver or if he's just like a deep threat, but like he's legit, right? I think he might be their best wide receiver, to be honest with you. but he doesn't get the playing time right now. Maybe he will down the line, but he was a high draft pick by, I believe, the Bears. I believe he was a second-round pick. And, Bears fans were like, this guy's legit, and he's never able to really put it together, but the talent's there. That doesn't include some of the other guys, right? Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster. They have Travis Kelce still as well, right? And they have a couple of running backs now, Kareem Hunt, Isaiah Pacheco. They have a rookie, Brashard Smith, who's pretty good. So the Chiefs are loaded on the offensive side. They haven't really figured out how to make it work with all these different guys, which has led them to struggle a little bit. But they did beat a really good Detroit Lions team on Sunday Night Football. So the Chiefs are obviously looking to kind of bounce back, kind of have that success as they go forward. The Raiders have their the biggest game of the season. You go into the bye at 3-4, it looks a lot better than 2-5, right? At 2-5, your season's over. At 3-4, there's a little bit of hope for the Raiders, right? Plus, obviously, being able to beat the Chiefs is a divisional game. I don't want to continue to try pushing like hype or whatever, whatever you guys want to call it. But the Raiders are better than their record, right? We've played a bunch of playoff teams that we lost to, and our offense hasn't even really figured it out. They look better against the Titans, but they still haven't really figured it out. And I know the Chiefs have all these weapons, but the Chiefs' defense is not as good this season, right? Their defense has struggled a little bit. I think the Raiders should be able to find success against the Chiefs, hopefully, as they take them on. I believe this is in KC. We'll see what ends up happening, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What are your guys' thoughts on Jack Bech officially kind of taking over? What are your guys' thoughts on Brock Bowers, on Rashee Rice, some of the other things that we're kind of hearing? Let me know what you guys think, man. I hope you guys have a great day. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.